A lot has been said about Akira Kurosawa and samurai movies in particular, from them taking inspiration from John Ford movies to them inspiring the Western genre in return. Akira Kurosawa will even go as far as inspiring some of the greatest Hollywood filmmakers, from George Lucas to Steven Spielberg, or even Quentin Tarantino.
This is what you get for fucking around, Yakuzas! Go home to your mother!
And while most people would cite Seven Samurai as the best and biggest Kurosawa film, there is a smaller, yet just as well-crafted film that deserves to be talked about as much, and that is the 1961 classic, Yojimbo. While the old westerns and even the more recent ones explore the villainous aspect of their protagonists, Kurosawa's Japanese westerns, if you can call them that, always had protagonists with honor, and it wasn't just Kurosawa movies, and that aspect was mostly linked to the samurai code. While the Wild Wild West was considered to be a society of outlaws and cowboys were either criminals or bounty hunters, mostly interested in profit, the Japanese movies had to take a similar approach while honoring the samurai code at the same time. The samurai code is known as bushido. Bushi meaning warrior and do meaning the way. So bushido basically stands for the way of the warrior. That reminds me of something.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
The virtues of bushido are rectitude, courage, benevolence, respect, honor, honesty, and loyalty. The bushido code can be identified in most samurai and pretty much all of Kurosawa films, probably due to the fact that his father came from a samurai family. In Seven Samurai, for example, Kanbei Shimura, the leader of the Seven Samurai, shaves his head to save a little girl, not because he was paid to do so, but because it was the right thing to do. The first of the Bushido code, rectitude, is also about doing the right thing or making the right decision, not because it's easy but because it's ethically and morally correct. And that is what Kurosawa based Yojimbo and its sequel Sanjuro on. Yojimbo is about the character Sanjuro, a wandering samurai who enters a rural town in 19th century Japan. After learning that the town is divided between two gangsters, he plays one side off against the other. His efforts, however, are complicated by the arrival of Onosuke, the son of one of the gangsters, who owns a revolver. The character of Sanjuro is not loyal to anyone. He does not really show respect. We are never told where he came from and who he used to serve or even who he is supposed to be loyal to. The character even refuses to give his real identity, as in both films he chooses his last name based on what's around him. Mulberry Field in Yojimbo, and Camellias in the sequel Sanjuro. That was Kurosawa's way of dishonoring him in a way. Some say a samurai is nothing without a master and has no reason to live without a code of honor. Sanjuro in Yojimbo starts off as this immoral and fallen warrior who does not mind playing both sides as long as it benefits him. This is not a man applying the Bushido code. He is not honest and honorable, and the restaurant owner despises him for it. Sanjuro at that point is not a samurai, but a ronin. In modern samurai stories, the ronin is often a loner who roams the countryside in search of someone willing to pay for his services. That's in part why the movie is called Yojimbo, as the word means bodyguard in Japanese. The ronin is the one who has neglected his Bushido code, just like Sanjuro. When we meet the character is a cold-blooded killer with no compassion or remorse, and that is until he's put in a position where he had to either close his eyes and only look after his own interests or remember the Bushido code and do the right thing. In A Fistful of Dollars, the American remake of Yojimbo, the protagonist justifies his actions.
Why do you do this for us?
Why?
I knew someone like you once. There was no one there to help. Now get moving.
Which comes off as random since there was no mention of anyone the protagonist knew but couldn't save before this moment. In Kurosawa's film, it is not justified, or at least not with words, because it's the one redeemable quality for Ronin. From that point, it is clear to the audience that Sanjuro does not respect any of the sides he's playing. For him, they represent corruption and greed and are the poison of Japanese culture. But all that changes when an innocent woman is separated from a child and forced into adultery. From that point, he went from an egotistic character to an altruistic hero. Kurosawa has always been great at doing altruistic heroes. In the sequel to Yojimbo, Sanjuro, we follow the character in a similar journey, but since it's a direct continuation, Sanjuro starts the movie as the altruistic hero we got to know in Yojimbo, this time helping a group of young samurai fight corruption within their own clan. The story of Sanjuro is really tragic when you think about it. A loner and masterless samurai who wanders around and kills people for money, then rediscovers his honor by doing the right thing, only for him to find out in the sequel that doing the right thing sometimes does not always result in killing a bunch of gangsters you despise, but sometimes a bunch of corrupt samurai you would have rather avoid killing. Sanjuro walking away at the end of both movies is not a random choice by Kurosawa. While making things better everywhere he goes, Sanjuro clearly sees himself as part of the problem. When he restores peace in a small town, he cannot stay and live there forever, because most deaths were caused by him. When he helps a group of samurai fight corruption, he cannot stay with them, because he did so through violence, and in a villainous way that represents a system that needs to be abandoned. So he leaves, alone. Like I said, a tragedy. To Sanjuro is not a hero. He is no better than the people he kills, because by saving one group he destroys the other, or in the case of Yojimbo, he destroys both. He's like the angel of death. Wherever he goes, a bunch of people die. It is what I like to call the villainy of heroism. And Kurosawa was really good at conveying all the emotions in his films visually. There are so many shots in Yojimbo alone that we could talk about for hours. For example, Kurosawa uses a lot of wide shots during Yojimbo, but if you pay attention, earlier in the film, anytime he uses a wide shot with Sanjuro in it, the Ronin always appears bigger than the rest, signifying his superiority and invincibility, while in the final showdown, the camera goes back and forth, making Sanjuro both big and small. It is done to build tension and shows that for the first time in the film, the protagonist is vulnerable and is fighting a battle he could very much lose. But what really ties everything to the villainy of heroism visually is definitely the use of blood and violence. There is more use of blood in Sanjuro than there is in Yojimbo, but Yojimbo is way more violent, and visually, Kurosawa always insisted on building tension to make every moment of violence feel as horrifying as they are, to make sure the audience empathize with the protagonist disgust at what he has become. So it's often a time of inactivity and silence, followed by an explosion of violence. Thank you for watching.